All right, good evening. We're glad you're here tonight. Let me update you on a couple of things. Harold Collins, his situation, he is still in the hospital, and they are put in a PICC line today. They're treating him for a staph and strep infection, and they're having to go at this very aggressively, and they're going to looks like he's going to be on something for, what'd you say, 6 weeks? Yeah, and then so he's got probably a few more days in the hospital, then probably will go to rehab after that. Much to his chagrin that he did not want to go. Also, Gail Spires, we had mentioned before, she had surgery on her neck, and they found some microcancer, they called it, on her thyroid, so they removed part of her thyroid. And they're doing some more testing, or checking, I should say, a second opinion, and as to what to do as far as moving forward, because they found that on her thyroid. But don't call her because she can't talk. It bruised her vocal folds and a nerve on that. So, and you don't need to blow up her phone with text, I was told. So you can do all of that to Blake. And but anything else, Blake? I was talking to your dad today. Okay. And also one other announcement: Kaylee, her niece, Emerson. She's 3 years old. They took her up to Shands today for what they call scalded skin syndrome. She had some kind of an infection that blistered and peeled the skin, and they said that it's if that's what it is, they'll treat it like a burn victim, and she will be in the infectious disease and everything section where she'll be shut down for several weeks. So if you can remember Emerson and keep her in your prayers as well. Anything else tonight that you know of or needs to be mentioned? All right, let's pray. Father, we are so very thankful that you're a God who cares and listens, and we know we're not worthy to come into your presence, but except by you allowing us to, and that Jesus has paved the way and made it possible. We are so thankful for him and so thankful for you in the planning and the Spirit as far as his work continues even to this day. We're praying, Father, for Harold and for Gail and for Emerson, this little child, that you'll be with all of them, help them in their recovery. Help those who are caring for them to provide the things that are most needful. And Lord, we rejoice as well that Maria Ramirez was baptized into your family this week, and what a joy it brought to the angels in heaven and to us as well. Pray that you'll bless her and help her in the things that are most needful for her life. Guide our thoughts and study tonight, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, well, last week I suggested to you that there are two different kinds of mountains. That there are obstacles that the Satan puts in our path, and there are opportunities that God puts in our path. And the truth is, we need to conquer both of them, and we need to address both of those mountains, as we talked a little bit about last week. But as men, especially, I am challenging you, we can't let obstacles deter us from what God's plan is and what his purpose is for our life. And as men, we need to take advantage of the opportunities that God places in front of us. So some of the obstacles we talked about when I asked you last week as to what would be some of those possible obstacles, you suggested relationship issues. We talked about how marriage or parent-child relationships can be an obstacle if we're not living right and doing right. Health matters. habitual sin that's something that we're not really dealing with in our life, and it's just a besetting sin in our life, that becomes an obstacle. Church problems can be an obstacle. All of those things, many, many more. We talked about opportunities that God gives us that sometimes look like a mountain, to step up and teach a class, or to step up and lead as an elder or as a deacon in the church, or to reach out to a neighbor or a friend, to walk through the awkward and say something to somebody, an opportunity. Sometimes it's a job, it's a promotion, it's a move. All of those might be opportunities for us. And it's just an important thing for us to remember and to realize. So the point of this is that Jesus, the key to Jesus overcoming all the obstacles that were put in his path, is that he envisioned the summit. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2 says that for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. So he envisioned the summit. He looked forward to, with joy, what was set before him. So it certainly wasn't the cross that was joyfully anticipated. So what was the joy that was set before Jesus? What was the thing that was set before him that continued to motivate him or move him forward? Okay, to do his Father's will, all right. What else can you think of? That's absolutely the case. Okay, yeah, the salvation of all mankind hangs in the balance. And so we pointed out last time, he didn't quit, he didn't cry, he didn't complain, he didn't whine, he didn't turn away, he didn't get distracted, he just continued to do what God wanted him to do. So I'm going to suggest to you that not only was it that Jesus did that for the salvation of mankind, the suggestion that I want to make, really challenge you with, is that your facing of the mountains that God places in your life have just as much weight or merit to your salvation, or maybe the salvation of your wife, or the salvation of your children, and how you address those mountains that come up, those opportunities or those obstacles, either one. Those mountains in your life may be the very thing that you have to conquer for their benefit, for your wife or for your children. If you give up, if you get tired, if you get distracted, or if you just quit climbing, then the results can be devastating. I mean, it can be devastating to your marriage and your wife's faith. It can be devastating to your children and your children's faith if you just go to a point and give up. Now, how many of you know somebody that's done that in their life? Just, they were a Christian for a while, and then whatever came up, and they just quit. Yeah, and what happens to the family typically after that? Yeah, I mean, the family ends, and a lot of times you see that faith story ends right there. I could name some folks in the 15 years that I've been here that I could see and say, you could too, and name a name and say, yeah, you know, when he quit serving God, this is what it did to his wife. This is what it did to his children. Their family is no longer faithful at all anymore. And so I'm going to tell you that you have a tremendous responsibility. I have a tremendous responsibility, especially as men, as leaders in our home and in our family, to conquer the mountains that are set in front of us. And Jesus knew that not only was it going to bring about the salvation of mankind or of all of humanity, but he also knew there was a second reason why to envision the summit, and that is to glorify God. This goes what Steve said a minute ago, to do his Father's will. In John chapter 17, verse 4, in Jesus' high priestly prayer, I have glorified you on earth. I have finished the work that you have given me to do. Henceforth, there's laid up for me a crown, and so on and so forth. He goes on, but he talks about all these other things, but I've glorified you. And now, O Father, glorify me together with you, with yourself, with the glory which I had with you before the world was. So he envisioned the summit. And the summit was that I'm going to achieve such a great thing in the sense of the salvation of all mankind. And at the same time, I'm going to glorify my Father by doing what he's asked me to do. Now, I think the same thing is true of us. You're not going to save all mankind by your addressing the mountains and conquering them in your life. But how do you do this? So you need to envision the summit. So that's Mount Everest. That's a beautiful, beautiful picture. I don't know how many I looked at today to see. That's Mount Everest. That's the summit of Mount Everest, which, by the way, is 29,032 feet. And so I'm going to save each one of you. So go ahead, Andrew, if you would. Okay, I'm going to save each one of you a minimum of $45,000, because that's what the look is. That's the view on the top of Mount Everest. And if you want to climb Mount Everest, you can. I looked at some things today, and the average cost is $45,000 once you get there. And you've got to get there, and you got to get your gear and everything else. So you can thank me afterwards that I have saved you. Appreciate it if you share that with your wife too, and let her know how much that I saved you on that. But that's pretty impressive, huh? 29,000 feet. You are truly in rarefied air up there. The air is exceedingly thin, and I have more to talk about this in the upcoming weeks as we'll see some other pictures from that. But that's impressive to envision the summit, to think, okay, this is what it's going to be like when I get up there. Anybody ever climb? What's the highest mountain somebody in here has climbed? Anybody climbed up to 10,000 feet? No? 5,000 feet? Huh? Okay. Of Mount LeConte? Okay. So how tall would you say that is? Well, I'm going to tell you. It is 6,593 feet tall. Okay? So when we, if you're going to join us when we do this in April, when we climb Mount LeConte, you actually have an elevation change of about 2,800 feet, because you start out at about 27 or so, somewhere around there, if I have the math right. But anyway, it's about an elevation change. You're going to climb about 2,800 feet. That's what we'll do on the Alum Clave Trail. So I just wanted you to know, we're not going to get up this high. Okay, we're not going to get up to the 29,000 feet. Any of you ever climbed in the Rockies at all? Anybody ever been in the Rockies? Okay, yes, sir. So did you do any climbing? Hiking? How high did you get? Do you know? Okay. What's that? Okay, the Tetons. All right. So I'm persuaded they're higher than some of the hills on the golf courses around here. That they call hills. Yeah. Jennings? Right. Okay, exactly. The car. I remember Melissa and I went to, we were at Crater Lake in Oregon and went hiking there. And we got out, and it's not really that high. I don't remember what the elevation was. And so we were in a restaurant, staying at the lodge, and she said, "Well, it is so cold in here." I said, "Well, here, I'll run back to the room, get your sweater." So I literally got to the base of the stairs to run up the stairs. And I ran up about 10 stairs, and I'm going, the air, it was unbelievable to me. It wasn't that high, but I sure could tell the difference just in that. So I trudged my way the rest of the way up the stairs, and lovingly brought my wife down her sweater so we could eat together. But the idea behind this is you've got to view the summit. Okay, we'll let you move on, Andrew. They're getting dizzy out here. So let's see here. Oh, we're waiting. Number 1. All right. So here we go. So let me tell you about 3 different things. Glory awaits us, as Jesus said there, that if we'll do these same 3 things. The first thing we need to do is set your mind on things above. Through the pain of the climb, through the shadows, through the darkness, through the clouds, through the difficulties that often obscure the summit. You know, a lot of times when you climb a mountain, a lot of times you can't see where you're going. When we lived out in the Northwest one time, Melissa and I went to Mount Hood. We drove to Mount Hood, And then we went to Timberline Lodge at Mount Hood, and as I turned to go up the mountain, I asked the guy who was at the place there, I said, so exactly where is the mountain? He said, you're on it. So, it was so obscured by the fog, by the clouds, you couldn't even see the mountain that day. They say, when out there in the Northwest, when you can see the mountain, what do they say? The mountain is out, okay? I mean, you can see the mountain, and it's beautiful. Well, we couldn't that day at all. So I was lost where we were at and everything else. So you have to set your mind on things above. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 2, set your mind on those things which are above. So what do you think he means by that? What does he mean by set your mind on things above? How do we actually do that? That's okay. Okay. So what should be the reward? What should be what we're looking for, or the summit? Yeah, it ought to be heaven. So in the meantime, aren't there other mountains before we get to heaven? And summits before we get to heaven? Yeah, there are. So how do we do that? How do you set your mind on things above? How do you actually do that? Give me some practical ideas. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Prayer and asking God a specific, is it right? Is it okay to ask God specifics? Sure it is. We tend to ask such broad things that we don't even know when God answers our prayers. God bless me tomorrow, okay? Sometimes we don't even know what that means. We don't even know what we're asking. But that's a very specific prayer. Lord, put somebody in my path today that I might be able to help, encourage, teach, whatever it is, okay? Jennings? Yeah. I love what Colin would say, send me someone to teach. And that's become a lot of my prayer life as well as a result of Colin. What else can we do to set our mind on things above? Okay, what do you mean by that? Okay, all right. Okay, so maybe I have to face one issue, whatever it might be, and address this and win this battle. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, all right. Jen? Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah, been there. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you have to tell okay, my calves are going to be burning, or this is going to hurt, that's going to, but to know and at least have an idea that it's not going to be just magic pill and here we go. That's right. Yeah, I did see a bear on that same trail, by the way, if you come on this Mount LeConte hike. But so anyway, I mean, there are things to do, things to prepare yourself with mentally, okay? I don't know what's going to happen to you tomorrow, nor to you. And so we do what we can, knowing that, all right, there may be some challenges that I'm going to face, but I keep on pushing on. So prayer, praying specifics, knowing that there are challenges in front of us. More? Okay. Yeah, sometimes setting my mind on things above is to see what has God said to me? And what should I learn from this? What should I take away from this? So there's lots of things to do, but sometimes we just tend to read the words on the page and we just, okay. But we have to be able to put it into practical terms. What does that mean? So often we just set the bar too low. We tend to set the bar very low in our relationships. We get married and everything's wonderful, and then we settle into just the normal routine. And so our marriage, well, it's fine. It's okay. The old lady, she's this, and the old lady, she's that, or whatever we may talk about, or however is often talked about. But we set the bar so low in our relationship. We settle for mediocrity is what we often do. We don't push ourselves through the hard times. We don't do the things that we ought to do sometimes. We don't set our mind on where it ought to be. We just kind of, this is what it is. I counseled with a young couple in Lakeland when we were living there and tried to encourage them and talked to the wife. And finally she said, Jody, look, I understand what you're trying to do. She said, but our marriage is what it is, and that's all it's ever going to be. Now, that's a terrible attitude, okay? And this was a Christian who it's all that it is, that's all it's ever going to be. So I appreciate you trying, but hey, basically she is saying, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to make any changes. And so we often do that. We don't push ourselves. Over the last several weeks, Jed's talked about in his gatherings that we've had on being better, being adventurous, being competitive. And some guys do that well in the gym, and they push themselves. And some guys do that well on their jobs, and they push themselves for their work or for their career. But relatively few men actually spiritually set their mind on things above and really have a plan and a purpose and a direction in mind. So what I'm encouraging you to do is set your sight, set your mind on those things that are above. In this very chapter, in Colossians chapter 3, a little bit later, Paul tells us some things to delete out of your life. He says fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, covetousness, anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language, lying. Those things, if I'm going to set my mind on things above, I'm going to press on to higher living. He says delete those things. So let me just ask you, is there anything in that list that challenges you? Anything on that list that makes it more difficult for you in your climb? Fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, covetousness, anger? Any of y'all ever get angry? Ever lose your cool? Wrath, the word wrath there is the immediate hot burst of anger that's an outburst that somebody does. Anger, the word anger there is a slow kind of boiling, getting madder and madder and madder, okay? Malice, blasphemy, filthy language. That a challenge for anybody? Lying. Then he tells us what to add into our life. Add these things into your life. And again in Colossians 3, tender mercy, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, forgiving one another, love. Let God's peace rule in your heart. Let Christ's word dwell within you. Do everything in the name of the Lord and give thanks. So are there any of those things on that list that challenge you and make your climb more difficult? So let me ask, tender mercy, does that characterize you? Kindness. Are you always kind to your wife? Are you always kind to your children, to your co-workers? Humbleness of mind. The word humbleness means to have it's the idea of having a low self. It's a low estimate of ourselves. As men, we tend to have a high estimate of ourselves as a rule. Meekness goes right along with that. Long suffering, another word would be patient. Everybody in here have that patience thing down? No, you're actually wondering when I'm going to keep moving on, I know, so obviously you don't. Bearing with one another, you're able to put up with other people, put up with people, forgiving and at peace. So the real question in all of that is, so what do you do? What do you do about it? Oh, well, it is what it is, and that's what it will always be, somebody says. Jesus brought 3 disciples with him up on the mountain to see Moses and Elijah. Again, that's an amazing thing to think of. Brings them up, and what it says, but before they got to see that amazing sight, Matthew chapter 17 and verse 1, he led them up on a high mountain. There was an opportunity in front of them, but they had to make the climb. So the question's really, are you willing to make that climb, to climb the high mountain to see the glory of God? Because it's going to take effort, just exactly what Jed was saying. It's going to take effort to do that. Will you strip off and put on God's righteousness, strip off the sin? That's going to take dedication to do that. Will you guide your family to new heights of devotion? It's going to take discipline to do that. Will you lead the way, loving your wife and being a godly husband? It'll take courage and it'll take patience to do that. And will you climb to higher levels of service as a teacher or as a song leader or as a servant or a deacon or an elder or whatever? It's going to take persistence. It's going to take humility. It's going to take willingness. All those things. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, beginning at verse 16. It says, so we do not lose heart. Even though our outward man is perishing, yet our inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, works for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory, which we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For those things which are seen are only temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. So again, set your mind on those things above. Those things that are eternal, those things that are God's principles and God's direction for life. Let me see if you've got a thought, question, anything on this. Okay, so number 2, keep your eyes on Jesus. Since Jesus conquered every mountain that stood in his way, this is what we're encouraged to do in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Run with endurance the race that is set before you, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of your faith. So, how do we do that? I mean, give me some specifics. I don't literally see Jesus. In fact, none of us have. 1 Peter talks about that. Even though you've not seen him, you love him. And though you don't see him, you trust him. So what's a specific thing I can do to look to Jesus if I'm going to try to climb this mountain in front of me, this challenge that Satan has put in front of me, or an opportunity that God's given to me? Yeah. Okay, yeah, because one of the hardest things, at least from everything I've read and seen and heard, of somebody retiring is it's hard to find measurement for achievement in their life. I mean, at a job or in a work career situation, it was either maybe the next promotion or the raise or whatever it is, and I had measurement for myself. But when a person retires, especially when a man retires, he tends to have his focus, his work is his life for a lot of men. It can be easily just all these distractions out here, or what do I do? Do I still have something that I'm purposely working toward? Okay. Okay, yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, so what else can we do to keep to look to Jesus? Blake? Huh? I'm sorry. Okay, all right. Yeah, well, actually, that's the next point, but you're right. Go ahead, Blake. Okay, all right. And how would that? But I mean, I think you're exactly right. And the idea of keeping my focus on Jesus is because He's told me I can come back. You know, when I do mess up. And I mean, if God just said, this is the straight and narrow, Jody, and if you veer off of it, it's your own, you know, hey, you're on your own. I mean, I wouldn't feel like I could come back. 5 minutes, 5 hours, whatever later, it'd be like, well, I guess it's over. You know, but He's fortunately has told me I can. Edwin? Spook Hill. Yeah. It would have sure been a. Okay, but we're moving on to the next point, but I mean, that is correct, of leaning on others as the third thing that we need to be able to do and willing to do. But, I mean, to keep my eyes on Jesus. Steve? Okay. Okay, yeah, I think that's exactly right. I've told Melissa before that, and I know I've said, for me, walking and praying is my best way to pray, and but I have noticed kind of along the same thing that if I'm sitting in the office or I'm in my car or I'm at home, it's like, well, I guess I got to get up and go walk if I'm going to pray, and I don't have to do that, but because that's become such a habit, as you say, and a comfort. I'm in this comfort zone when I do that. But still, having that regular communication with Jesus and with God about that. Go ahead, Mark.
It's just easier to read. So I'm online. I have friends I have never met, and I have friends who have defended me against something somebody else said. That, well, like once somebody hacked my computer and used the words OMG, and I had friends I've never met that came on immediately and said that's not Mark. They knew me so well,
Okay.
though they've never met. We never met Jesus face to face. I've got 100 friends, 1,000 whatever, that I've never met face to face. But I guarantee you, some of these people know me, and I know some of them as well as can be known. And it's about how much time do we spend talking to this person?
Okay.
How much time do I talk to Jesus? How much time do I listen
Right.
to Jesus? And if you read a book, you can put yourself in the scene. We do it all the time. We envision what it was like
Right.
to have been there. We do it all the time anyways. Well, I absolutely can do it with Jesus.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. All of these things are really good ideas about doing it, and so I just want you to think in those terms. But notice in your handout here, I've got Roger Bannister. Most everybody knows who he is, probably. But he did what was thought to be humanly impossible. It was in 1954 that Roger Bannister did what? Broke the 4-minute mile, okay? So now, most all of us know that, okay? Or we've heard that at some way or another. A decade earlier, 1944, a 4-minute and 1-second mile was recorded. And that record stood for 9.5 years. Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, and 6 weeks later, his record was broken. And since that time, there's well over 1,700 athletes who have broken the 4-minute barrier. Seeing somebody do something, doing the impossible, said, what? I can do that too. Okay? I mean, that's what it fed in their minds. So we have a champion. That's the whole point here. We have a champion. We have a hero. We have one who's made it. And that is looking unto Jesus. We're to look to him and follow in his footsteps. Matthew chapter 11 and verse 28. He said, I'll give you rest. I'll give you the crown of life. I'll grant for you to sit on my throne. How could he do all of that? Because he's paved the way. He's made it there. He is the champion. He's the one who's gone over there to that point. And so what I need to do, and you need to do, is keep looking unto him. And then this third point that we'll close with tonight is to lean on others. This is a passage in Ecclesiastes chapter 4 that you're going to hear next year from Jed and from myself a number of different times. A common malady among men is this Lone Ranger syndrome, the feeling that we don't need help. We never ask for directions, obviously, and I can make it on my own. I want you to know that's an anti-biblical point. That's anti-biblical in its concept. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who is alone when he does fall. For he has no one to help him up. Again, if 2 lie down together, they'll keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? The one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. And so those verses from Ecclesiastes 4, they confirm what mountaineers have known for decades, and that is it's always dangerous to hike alone. Always. All you have to do is just twist your ankle slightly, and now you're down or you're hobbling and you can't make it out. We've heard stories, you've seen news reports, somebody slips and falls. The most horrendous one of the guy who pulls out, I don't remember his name, his pocket knife, got it wedged in and literally cut his arm off so that he could get out. He was by himself. So the scriptures teach it's not biblical to just be the Lone Ranger, to just be your own self and to have nobody else helping you along the way. One of the best ways to make it to the top is to have others help you. Now, to go back to what Edwin was saying, when Jed's running Spook Hill and you've got other guys that are pulling the weight as well and saying, oh, I gotta at least beat this guy. I mean, I'm gonna work as hard as he is, and we push one another in that situation. The athletic field and the military field always highlight this very concept of togetherness, of having a buddy, having somebody with you there to help you along the way. So rather than it showing some kind of weakness, which is what men often think, it actually is showing a sign of strength and of wisdom and understanding. When Jesus sent out the disciples in Luke chapter 10 and verse 1, he sent them 2 by 2. Why do you think he did that? It'd be awfully easy to give up, but this encouragement of the other person, I've got to stay in it for him, he needs to stay in it for me, and so we work together and try to encourage one another. And he sent them out 2 by 2 to do that. So I'm asking you, and this is a tough situation for a lot of guys, but do you have somebody that you can lean on? Somebody that you can turn to and lean on when the climb does get steep for you? I mean, is there somebody you can talk to? And somebody who will say, no, you're wrong. That's not the way to look at it. So, somebody who will be honest enough with you to say, look, you need to suck it up. Or you need to do this, or you need to stop doing that. And will look at you and tell you those things. Because you need to have that in your life. Go ahead, Jennings. Yeah, and be willing to be that. That's right, that you can be that person for somebody else. Somebody that you could actually talk to, or you could call, or you could sit down with and say, and they could say to you, you know what, I'm concerned about you. Because I've seen you do this recently. And I'm concerned about your soul because it seems to me like, and you fill in the blanks, because whatever that blank might be. But if you don't have somebody that does that, or somebody who's willing to have that kind of relationship with you, it's just easy to nebulously float through life thinking you're doing okay. Maybe knowing you're not doing okay, but not challenged enough to change. So it's important to have somebody to work with in that regard. I would encourage you to build a relationship with someone or ones who can and will do that for you and with you and allow you to do it as well. So what do you need in a relationship like that? What are some things that you need to have a relationship with somebody that you could talk to at a gut level response and say, I'm concerned about you because of this? Okay, so you got to have trust. So how do you build trust? Okay, yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay, so trust, you're building trust. You know, basically, most people we start out at a certain degree of trust with everyone. I mean, the person standing in back of you at the grocery store, they bump you with their basket and they say, oh, I'm sorry, didn't notice. We basically trust them that they didn't just ram the basket into us, right? But if it happens 3 times, now what do you think? Besides, hey, open your eyes, what do you think? When they say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there the 3rd time. Yeah, that they did it on purpose, exactly. I mean, you think, no, I can't trust this person. You're going to hand them your bank book, tell them your social security number? No, I mean, that's not somebody you can trust. So you have to build trust. We basically give that to somebody as a general rule at a certain level, and they do something that makes them show to be lacking in trust. Now where are they? Now they're in negative numbers, okay? It's going to take a while for them to get back up again. So we have to be trustworthy, be friendly. What else can you do? What do you need to do? Bring something to the table, as in... Okay. Okay. Yeah, if we're going to build a relationship that we're going to have this, it's going to be not just a mentor-mentee relationship. Now we're talking about somebody who's going to be kind of a partner with me. Yeah, you're right. I've got to bring something. You need to bring something. Okay. So find out what that is that you have. So talent or abilities or whatever. What else you need to do? Mark?
Kind of along that line, it has to be somebody with the ability to help. It can't just be anybody. It can't just be somebody with good intentions. They need to know you. They've got, just this past week, a man Tallahassee who's working with me in business said, do I need to call you 2 weeks to see if you've done this? I said, yeah, go ahead. I gave him permission
Okay.
to hold me accountable to him, and he has permission to punish me if I don't. But I would never go to him to say, can you help me with my faithfulness to God?
Okay.
He's not qualified for that. Somebody else might be, but he's qualified for this other thing.
Sure, yeah. You may go to somebody because they're a great financial counselor and get financial advice from them, but spiritually they may be bankrupt. I mean, so you do have to see what they have to. Yeah, and to bring that. So, I mean, what else you got to do? You got to be willing to become vulnerable and open up. I mean, if you're actually expecting to get anywhere in a relationship with that, you've got to say, hey, look, I struggle with this, okay? And maybe you can help me. And of course, most men, they don't struggle with anything. Just ask them, you know. That's right. I'm fine. You're fine. We're all fine. If you're not fine, don't come to this church because we're the church of the fine. So, I mean, that's kind of the message we send out sometimes. So how do you become vulnerable? And somebody not just say, oh my goodness, I wasn't expecting this. I mean, you don't just regurgitate everything on the table the first time you sit down with them. What do you do? Huh? Okay, so how do you do that? That's right. How do you do that? Okay, it might be. But I mean, don't you have to ask some questions. Hey, could I share something with you? I mean, could we keep it between the two of us? And then maybe you float out a balloon there, and then the next thing you hear 3 weeks later that he's told 4 other people, and you think what? All right, this is not the guy. I mean, you know that, right? He's not the guy that you can entrust anything to as far as your soul is concerned. But you find out he comes back to you in 2 weeks and he says, so how are you doing with that? I've been praying for you, and I'm just wondering, how are you handling that? How's that going? Okay, now I feel a little better, okay? And maybe the next time I'm able to open up a little bit more. And then maybe that works both ways. I realize I'm talking Chinese for some of you because you're looking at me like, I ain't ever gonna do that, all right? But I'm just telling you that leaning on others is critical to helping you make it to the top and envisioning that they're gonna be there. So here, let me just close with this. I just want to, and I know this isn't the Bible, so we're gonna close and let you know we're closed. But if you think you are interested at all in joining us on this men's mountain climb of Mount LeConte outside of Gatlinburg, it'll probably be in April next year. Please write your name down on one of those prayer cards or something and hand it to me before you leave tonight. Just trying to get a count. Thank you so much for being here.